last video we were looking at what I think is an important defensive principle, that is trying to parry by keeping your hand motion as small as possible, so that if there is a feint or a redirection or some other unexpected event, you haven't made a big commitment of your arm one side or the other, and you've got time to make a second parry if necessary. Miles has asked a really good question, which is, how does that work when you're making hanging parries? Because aren't they bigger actions? That's a really good question, so let's have a look.
So the question is, how do you make your hanging parries with a small minimal hand movement? Or can you indeed? And it depends a little bit on where you're starting. If you're starting down here in a low ward, a staccato or a passata, Silver says specifically don't parry hanging from here because it is such a big movement. So if you can go to open ward, yep. Okay, so if I get a direct attack to my head, I've got plenty of time to lift that up into a hanging guard. If, however, he does a feint or a redirection and sort of cuts one and then turns it into a two, this is such a big commitment of my sword, I can't turn back for a second parry. Okay, so that's a bad thing to do, and that's what you want to avoid. However, if you're starting in something like an outside guard, a forehand ward, you can make your hanging parry with much more minimal movement. Okay, so from here, I can do that. So what I'm doing is basically a wrist motion, dropping my sword and rolling it in a circle. So my hand motion is really that. It's very small. The tip of the sword is moving, but the hand is not. So if I get the same problem of cut one, cut two, I have time to turn it back over. In fact, the movement to here can turn into that as part of the same circle. And that's one of the reasons why Swetnam says this is a better guard than that. And in this particular case, Swetnam is right. Okay? So I can do a minimal hand movement there. Okay? If it's a cut to the other side and I'm already in a hanging guard, again, it has to be a reasonably big movement. Okay, so if I'm in garden and I get a reverse cut, I've got to stick my sword all the way out there into a broad ward. If I'm in a hanging guard and I get a cut too, I've got to roll it all the way up into an outside guard. So they are both quite big actions out of necessity. Okay, and does that leave you a little bit vulnerable to a feint to the other side? Possibly. But let's have a look a little bit more closely at it. So if you can feint two, cut one, feint two, cut one. Actually, that defense, when properly done, intercepts it. Okay? So he can draw that, but he can't really get around the broad ward, so assuming I've moved my feet correctly, in order to strike to the other side. So that's one of the ways I can get around it. If I'm in a hanging guard and I'm doing an outside parry, turning it back to the inside is again pretty instinctual, and it becomes part of the same circles. If it was a direct attack, I would cut two, parry outside, cut inside. Okay? If it turns into a feint, parry outside, cut inside, gives me my second parry. So in both those cases, it's okay. What if it's a low cut? Okay, so horizontal cuts to either side, and I've got to use a bastard garden or inside or outside half hang, which are the same thing. Okay, in this case, I have to make a big commitment. I have to have a straight arm. Okay, if you can throw a cut one at my head, I don't need to straighten my arm for this parry. This is really strong and secure, so I can just leave my sword there. If it's low, I must extend. I must have a straight arm and parry 40 to forte in order to make it work. If I don't, if I do it with a bent arm, I do not have the structure to stop it. Okay, so this has got to be that. Okay, on the other side, that. Okay, so those are big commitments. They are big actions. And it is possible for somebody to feint low, cut high. Do this carefully. Blah! Okay, that is a distinct possibility, okay? But it's the only way that you can make one of these parries work is with a deep commitment. So really the key to that is when you're parrying, particularly from garden, you want to actually be watching your opponent's sword hand, okay? So that you can follow them should they try and redirect. So I'm actually going to watch that hand so I can track it reasonably easy. If I watch the sword, it's going to move too quick. The hand, however, gives me the clue as to where that attack is going. If it's going to drop low, if it's going to come up high, if it's going to turn over to the other side. Okay? So, yes, I have to straighten my arm and make that a big action, but any secondary parries don't have to be particularly big. Okay? So, as long as I'm aware that they could change direction and I could be wrong about it, as long as I'm tracking that hand, it's okay. So that's how you make hanging parries with as minimal hand movement as possible.